Committee, Representative DeFazio of Oregon for an opening statement.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is a really important hearing, examining different infrastructure technologies and other initiatives airports, stakeholders, airlines are using to mitigate or potentially in the future mitigate the effects of aviation on carbon pollution and climate change. The recent WHO numbers were, in terms of the single biggest threat facing humanity, and the numbers we've had just this last week that we're potentially going to have exceed the 1.5 goal in, which was considered a 0% in 15 by 2025. Things are accelerating. Aviation is growing tremendously. So we do need a major focus on aviation. I have a little different figure in terms of the total impact than Ranking Member Graves, but it is small. But given the projections in growth, and given the fact that other sectors have more available, immediate, off-the-shelf alternatives to reduce carbon, aviation will grow very quickly as a percentage of emissions. And I appreciate Alaska being here today, which is generally my go-to airline, being on the West Coast, and the fact that they're working in many different ways, as are a number of the other airlines. I met with the transport minister from Great Britain just last week, and they are going to offer, and any airline anywhere in the world is eligible to participate, a substantial prize for the first company. Of course, I don't think that's a route Alaska flies, but one of your partners would, from Great Britain to the U.S. With 100% sustainable fuel. But the issue is, how are we going to produce those kind of volumes? How are we going to distribute it? In the INVEST Act, we had substantial funding for the technology and the infrastructure that would be needed at airports. As we move toward sustainable aviation fuels, unfortunately, the totally dysfunctional Senate, in writing its version behind closed doors, left out that provision among many others that could potentially deal with climate change, since the bill was written by climate deniers, and that's a shame. I hear the gentleman's frustration about the FAA. I share it, and I talked to Secretary Buttigieg last weekend and said we need a transformative manager, leader of the FAA. I'll just point to one thing that's really irksome. We put one sentence in the last FAA reauthorization: flight attendants shall have the same duty rest time, I hope the FAA is listening, as pilots. Somehow that had to go through a major rulemaking. That wasn't clear what that meant. That's total BS to begin with. It's 4.5 years later, and they haven't even forwarded that rule to the regulatory bureaucracy called OIRA and OMB, who should be eliminated. But it's got to go there before we can finally implement that one sentence. So if they can't get something that simple done, how are they going to deal with these new complex issues? So I share the gentleman's frustration with that. We're going to hear a lot today that's very interesting from the witnesses on what can be done in the air and on the ground to mitigate carbon emissions that are related to aviation. And I'm excited to hear the testimony. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.